Hello, I'm Larry Berkelhammer, and I'm here with Chris Furbee, who lives with Huntington's disease, which is a very serious neurodegenerative disease. It's progressive, it's inherited, and if you inherit the gene, you do get the disease. So we're going to be discussing what it was like for him finding out he had the gene, what it was like watching family members, like his mother, live with the disease, and what it's like for him living in the early stages of the disease. So welcome, Chris. Good
Thank you, Larry. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I do feel very privileged being able to talk to you about this, because this is a topic that I think a lot of people don't know about. First of all, Huntington's is a rare disease, and when you have it, it changes your life forever. So I'd like to hear from you, maybe share with us what it was like for you when you first learned about the disease, who it was in your family that first got diagnosed.
Well, that would be my my granddad, my mom's father, basically was symptomatic when I was about 5. I knew something was wrong with him, but it wasn't like it's scary or anything. It didn't, frighten me, but I just knew that something was different between him and other
because of the way he was, the core.
He had a bunch of, correct, he had a bunch of movements.
Yeah.
And then what happened was, at the age of 8, I decided that I wanted to know more about it. So I asked my dad what Huntington's disease was. And he told me, well, at the time, what they knew was that it was a hereditary neurological disorder. He said that if my granddad had it, so if he has it, my mom has a 50% chance of getting it. And then, of course, if my mom gets it, I have a 50% chance of getting it as well. So that was, and symptoms usually started at that point around the age of 40 was their research.
Yeah, it's late. There are a lot of neurodegenerative diseases, many of which start much earlier than that. But Huntington's often starts in the 40s, even 50s.
Actually, they've 30s to 50s is kind of the range now. And also there's a juvenile HD, which is really, it's horrible. Anytime children are affected by a disease, it's horrible. But, their lifespan is cut very short, and they actually have more of a rigidity than the chorea. So it's a small percentage of the population that get it. Maybe like 10%.
So the majority of the people who get Huntington's disease get the form you have?
Yes, correct.
How old was your mother when she was diagnosed?
Well, she was never diagnosed. She was in denial the entire time that she had Huntington's disease. So she never went to a doctor.
So she never got tested?
Right. Well, right. So basically, but it's obvious because it runs in the family. So it was pretty obvious. So I would say I knew when I was probably about 15 years old that, something was wrong with her, because she had some movements.
You could recognize the symptoms?
Yes, I could.
You had seen those symptoms in your grandfather?
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned also an aunt?
I have an aunt, yeah.
Your mother's sister?
You're correct.
Yeah. So you had already seen those symptoms, so you knew what you were looking at?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
How did that affect you?
It was really hard for me, watching my mom and my granddad getting sick with that, and my aunt getting sick. I lived in West Virginia until I was 18, and basically, when I had an opportunity to move out of the house, I just, I left. I moved out to California where my dad was living, because I wanted to get away from the disease.
Of course, most 18-year-olds want to get out of the house anyway.
That's true.
And go off on their own.
Yeah.
But in your case, was it more than that? Was it that you were You were trying to get away from
Oh yeah,
the
there's
disease.
yeah, yes, exactly. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I didn't want to see my mom getting sick, every day and having to see that.
And you were close to her.
Oh yeah,
So to see her going downhill like this was pretty difficult.
yeah, it is very difficult for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Was the move to California an escape from it?
Yes, it was. For a time, it definitely was. I went back and visited a few times after I had left. I think I probably went back maybe once a year. I planned a vacation. And then what happened is after that, I decided that, I guess I didn't want to go back home anymore.
What was it like each time you went back?
It was difficult seeing my mom because she had progressed a little more, each time. It was obvious that she was getting worse and more symptomatic. And basically it got to a point where I just, there was a 5-year period where I was in denial myself. I didn't go home at all. I was living out here in California. There's no Huntington's disease out here. It's thousands of miles away.
So you really thought, you wanted to believe you could just really get away from it.
Something interesting though happened to me. It was actually around the time that my grandmother died, actually, out in Fairfax where I was living. I was at this grocery store. Went in, got my purchase, got my food, and stood in line. And all of a sudden, I was looking at the front of the line, and there's a guy standing there. And I see him, and he's got all these movements. He's got all this chorea. And I knew.
You knew what it was.
I knew it was Huntington's. And I could see that the cashier, was looking at him like he was drunk. But I knew that guy had Huntington's disease.
Is that a common thing that people with Huntington's have people look at them like they're drunk?
Early on, yes. So basically, it had probably been about 5 years, like I said, at that point, since I'd even looked at anyone with Huntington's disease. And all of a sudden, this stuff just started welling up in me, and all this emotion just started to overcome me. And
you had thought that by coming to California, you could somehow run away from it.
Exactly. And here it is, staring me
right
in,
at you.
right. And so I basically, I paid for my purchase, and I got home as quick as I could, and I went home and I lost it. I just started crying because it was all that stuff that obviously I'd been holding in. Right.
At that point, was it mostly grief around your mother and her sister and your grandfather, or were you starting to worry more about what could happen to you?
I think it was a little of everything, actually. It had to do, I mean, my granddad was dead at that point, but my mom was still alive, my aunt was still alive. So, there was concern for them.
Had you been tested at that point?
No.
So at that point, you were thinking, I mean, many people remember Woody Guthrie, who had Huntington's disease. And I remember being a fan of Arlo Guthrie, thinking someday he's going to get it. And then I learned years later that he may not get it. And in fact, he never did get it.